It's a miracle. All right, yeah, thanks very much, John. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, as John said, my name's Tim Dargavel. I'm from Sydney. I'm from Brisbane. I'm in Sydney. It's been a full day.
SBS food.
Yeah.
Sorry, I must have accidentally pressed the button there.
Yeah,
No, I did indeed.
Yeah, and Ash, can you take the remote off him? Not to be trusted.
It's already had a few too many, hey?
Yeah, no more drink cards for
That's
you.
it. All right, there you go, Has. Take your drink.
So, yeah, my background's in tech, but not the sort of tech. Bitcoin, very boring tech that runs mainframes, banks, government departments. I've worked in that space for sort of 30, 35 years, so I know lots and lots about it. Only been in the Bitcoin space for a couple of years, so most of you are all probably far more significantly veteran than I am. I've learned loads from meetups. I've been to loads of meetups over the last couple of years. Listened to podcasts, including Stephanie's excellent podcast.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Amongst many others. And drunk everybody else's beer and eaten everybody else's pizza. So after all that time, the thing that I've started to learn more about is Lightning, and I'm delighted to say, or to feel that I've got to a point where I can talk about it reasonably knowledgeably and articulately, and hopefully give a little bit back to the community and help other people's knowledge along like mine's been. Right. So this evening is all about an introduction to the Lightning Network. We're going to do it in 3 parts. So the first part is a little bit about the genesis of Lightning, where did it come from, why is it an issue, why do we need it. The second part's about what Lightning is, how it works, and lastly, where's it going. Jump in at any time with questions and see how it goes. Okay, so let's start with the basics. The Lightning Network is a scaling solution for Bitcoin. So it's built as a layer on top of Bitcoin, so there are a number of implementations for that. It leverages Bitcoin's security. That's one of the key things about Lightning. And Lightning transactions are fast, cheap, and more private than on-chain transactions. So those are all the things that Lightning promised in the beginning, and I'm pretty excited that they're actually working and doing those things. Is it perfect today? Not quite. Okay, so why is the whole scaling thing a big deal in the first place? Firstly, adoption. Here we are in Australia's biggest city, Sydney, and this is the sum total of the Bitcoin nerds. I say that in a loving way, including myself, of course. So if we think about a much wider adoption, then clearly we're going to need more transaction processing capacity. That part of the conversation has been going on since about 2 days after Satoshi Nakamoto released the white paper. Programmable money, as a bit of a tech nerd, programmable money is one of the things that quite excites me. Those are, we can start to do things with money intelligently at the money level that we've never been able to do before. I'm not sure we've really thought about how that's going to be used, but as it is, that as those things do occur, those things will generate more volume as well. Internet of Things. Internet of Things is vast and growing at a stupendous rate and is not going to be free of commercialisation. So when you're talking about billions of devices, and we're already in the multiple billions, and those things are not going to be run as a charity, they are going to be run on a commercial basis at some point. What better way to run them with intelligent programmable money on the Bitcoin network? Can you transact through an Internet of Things device on the main chain? Yeah, probably not. Technically you can. Does it make sense to? So, in terms of the sort of numbers we're talking about, you can see over here, we're here at 2019, so we're at about 26 billion IoT devices today. So by 2025, we're at 75 billion devices. So if some portion of those devices start to transact commercially, think, for example, a drone. A drone with a camera that's watching traffic patterns. So instead of the fixed cost of putting traffic cameras all over the place, the traffic authority could look for traffic hotspots dynamically. So they're going to need recharging. So you could think about the same type of thing that some of the electric scooter model uses. You could put electric charging pads on rooftops. Who pays for that? Well, the drone pays for that. How does it pay for that? It can pay for that over the lighting network. At the moment, on the current legacy fiat financial model that we all use and love, there are about 1 billion financial transactions a day. That translates to around about 750,000 transactions a second. And of course, people. So today, there are about 7.5 billion people on the planet. By the end of the century, it will be somewhere between 10 billion and 11 billion. Now, this group here that I've highlighted here are the high-income OECD countries. Definitely includes Australia, most of Europe, or all of Europe, all of US, obviously. But that only represents about 1 billion of the 7.5 billion people in the planet. Of the remainder, there's a much smaller percentage that have bank accounts. This is the percentage of people with bank accounts. So in what we refer to as a level 4 economy, or the West, it's almost everybody. Almost everybody has got access to a bank account. Not everybody, but almost. If you happen to live in the Middle East or Sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia, no, you're in the exception to have a bank account. So there's a whole dialogue about banking the unbanked. I think also there's the equally and slightly more interesting about unbanking the banked. But either way, this is why scaling is a big deal. So we can process about 7 transactions a second on the Bitcoin network. It's not really going to cut it when we start talking about those sorts of numbers. So these types of things were where people were looking ahead going, okay, Bitcoin's working, but we need a scaling solution. So blockchain's pretty cool. They have some great things about them. They're decentralized, they have incredible security. Speed is not one of their great things. But this is much like project management. You can have any two. You can have it on time, on budget, to the quality you need. Pick two. So do you want it fast and cheap? Or do you want it on time to a high quality? It all depends. So if you're NASA and you're building a spacecraft, you absolutely definitely want very, very high quality. You're prepared to pay for it and you're prepared to wait for it. So a lot of this was the discussion that drove into all of the scaling debate in 2013, 14, 15, 16, and ultimately 2017. So this is not so much a right and a wrong, but it's what you prioritise. So some of the advocates of the fork that split off, the various cash forks, they said, look, we don't need anything else. A simple way to make things transact faster, to make blocks bigger. We've got all the same technology, hardware, bandwidth, processing power. that all scales. That's going to be fine. Look, we've got 30 years of Moore's law that tells us that processing capacity doubles every 18 months, I think it is. So we'll just make the blocks bigger, and therefore we'll be able to put more transactions in them, which means our transaction processing capacity goes up. The problem with that is you compromise security and you compromise decentralization. So Bitcoin got to the point where we could not reach a social consensus. So that drove a fork. Bitcoin said, no, we want to keep the chain as it is. It's designed like that for good reason, and we do need to scale, but the scaling needs to be as a layer 2 solution, something that's built on top of it. So this actually came into my feed yesterday. I've got the link. I'll give John the slides, and if you can put it up, we can put it up on the. You put the link. I'll put the link to the slide. I'll send you the link to the slides.
We're videoing the event, but we'll put a link in the description of the video to the slides.
Yeah, I'll put the slides up.
Yeah.
In the Telegram group and the meetup.
Right. Okay.
So these are pretty great visualization. I've got the links to the author who did that, cryptographics. Absolutely beautiful, but the early versions of the Lightning Network paper started in 2015. The version which is currently in use is the version finished in 2016. Through 2018 was the launch of the network and its gradual usage. So then we get into the tail end of 2018 and start of 2019. We've actually got some volume now, so late last year we had 100 BTC committed into the channels on the network, and now we're at 2019 in March, we've got 1,000 BTC committed on the Lightning Network. Okay, does that make sense in terms of a context and background of why there was the whole need to be able to scale on Bitcoin? Anyone got any questions? Everyone's still awake?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Let's rock and roll then. Yeah, so let's have a look at how Lightning works. So, 3 basic components: nodes, channels, and transactions. It's still only about Bitcoin. There are no Lightning tokens. There are no Lightning coins. It's still Bitcoin being spent on the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network requires different wallets, so you can't use your standard Bitcoin wallet to spend. You need a Lightning wallet. And payment codes are different. And it's really fast and it's really cheap. So we'll have a look at how fast and cheap in a minute. So, nodes. So a Lightning node runs on top of the Bitcoin, a Bitcoin full node. It's pretty lightweight. You can run a Bitcoin Lightning node on a Raspberry Pi or an old laptop. Who was I speaking to before who's running their Bitcoin node on an old laptop? Yeah. Exactly. So you can actually put a Lightning node over the top of that. You obviously need a network connection. The inner box solutions, if you're not particularly technical and you want the easy way out, or if you're like me who fall into the I'm time poor category, you can go to Casa and you can buy node in a box. Or you can go to Novel. Novel also run node in a box. Novel is pretty cool actually. I wish I'd seen Novel before I saw Casa. Because now I have to get a Novel as well as a Casa.
A bit faster.
Well, no, there's more things to play with.
Yeah, that's it.
You get a free Trezor and a Faraday bag at least, so take that to the bank.
Yeah, exactly. And the guides for building Lightning nodes are really pretty good now. So nodes can be public or private. So you can run them on the open network, or you can run them on the Tor network. Now, Bolt is the Lightning standard. Now, Bolt, the objective of Bolt is to take the ideas. Oh, sorry.
Just on public or private, I think the distinction is you can have a node that has private channels,
Yep.
or a node that has public channels. Is that not what perhaps is important?
I think we're both right, actually. So, yes. So public nodes are routing nodes.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, public nodes are routing nodes. Private are non-routing nodes.
Like a
And
phone
then,
wallet.
As well as that, then you can run them on the open network and you can run them on the Tor.
Yeah. A good example would be phone wallets. Typical phone wallets are private, they're not doing routing.
Correct.
Whereas typically like your Nodal or your Casa could actually do routing, or your set up old laptop node.
So I run an Eclair wallet, and that has a single channel back to my Casa node, and that's a private. Eclair is effectively a private node. And interestingly, the channel can't be discovered when you go and look at my Casa node. So Bolt is the definition of the Lightning standards, and there are multiple implementations. Now, you often hear poor old Blockstream gets a bit of clobbering sometimes from some sectors. Blockstream is one of 4 or now 5 implementations of the Lightning Network. Now, the important thing about having a standard here is that it should not matter whether my Lightning node, which I've stood up and run, whether that software has come from Eclair, from Blockstream, from Lightning Labs, or from MIT. We want to make sure that they can all interoperate, they open and close channels the same, they route their transactions the same, they collect and monitor the fees the same way. Bolt is that implementation. Bolt is that standard definition. And I think the first definition of the standards is now formally being finalised. So, on top of nodes, channels. Channels are a connection between, channels are connections between nodes. So they're funded with Bitcoin and denominated in sats. So usually when we talk about transacting on the Bitcoin network, we'll talk about, my 1,000 BTC transaction on the weekend where I went and bought my Ferrari, or maybe not me, but others perhaps. On the Lightning Network, everything is denominated in Satoshis. So 100 million Satoshis in Bitcoin, it tends to be, we talk about sats. So how many sats is this, how many sats is that. To create a channel, you have to fund the node with Bitcoin and open the channel with a certain quantity of sats. That, when you open the channel, that's secured with an on-chain transaction. So there are only 2 times where you transact with the Bitcoin network itself, the base layer. One is when you open the channel, and one is when you close the channel. Once your channel is open, you can transact within the limits of that channel until the cows come home. So I could be running a pizza store. John could be my cheese supplier, and we establish a Lightning channel between ourselves. And so whenever John brings cheese to my store, I can pay him with Lightning and send the sats across the channel back to John. So that has the same security level as Bitcoin. It doesn't have the same speed. That happens pretty much within a second. Channels can be created manually. I know John's a supplier to my business. We can set those up manually. Or you can use Autopilot. So Autopilot was something that came out towards the end of 2018, and that automates the creation of the channels. So That's what I used when I set my Casa node up and it started. I put some Bitcoin in the Bitcoin wallet. I made that available to the Lightning node and I said, okay, autopilot, go out and create some channels. I'm putting 0.1 of a BTC in, go and create channels of around 0.01. And so it goes and trawls the network and goes, who's good for Tim to be connected to? And it goes and picks a range of nodes that already exist, ideally nodes with plenty of other channel connections. So there's been pretty strong global channel growth. The channel growth is at the moment about 40,000 nodes, 40,000 channels and about 4,000. Sorry.
nodes. 8,000 nodes, 40,000 channels. Well, it depends what site you use.
Yeah, and how they count it. So 1ML is a great place to go and have a little browse around. You can look at things by continents. We can look at things, we can drill down into Oceania where we live. And then we can see there's Living Room Satoshi, one of theirs. We can search. So that's my name, my Telegram name, my node name. There we go, that's me. I've got 10 channels open. I have 0.026% of the entire Lightning Network channel capacity. Yeah. Not very exciting. Okay. Back to this. Yeah, so you can create channels manually or you can use the autopilot. The autopilot makes things really easy for when you're starting and setting things up. You can create them manually, and the manual creation, I suspect even that will die away. There will be clever engines that work out the best types of connections. And that's where running a Lightning node to collect routing fee payments will become quite interesting. That leads us to transactions. So a payee creates an invoice. So John's delivered my cheese, to my bags of grated cheese to my pizza shop. He cracks open his Lightning wallet and creates an invoice. I scan it and send it. The routing is found. So let's say before John and I set the channel up, I've actually only got one Lightning friend. And my Lightning friend is Stefan. Now, so when I want to send something to John, my little Lightning node says, well, who do I know in the Lightning world? Well, bloody sad sack, we've only got one friend, go and talk to him. So my node talks to Stefan's node and says, I've got a payment for 2 million sats to route to that person over there. Do you know that person? And Stefan's node goes, no, I don't know that person, but I'll ask someone who does. And so Stefan sends it out to all of his nodes. One of them's Hass, and Hass goes, yeah, I've got a connection to that one. And I'll route the payment for 2 sats. And then he comes back to Stefan and goes, yeah, I've found it. And Stefan goes, well, sweet, that's good. I only charge 1 sat. So then he comes back to me and he goes, yep, we found the routing. You can send you 2 million sats and it's going to cost you 3 sats in routing fees. And I go, yep, that's good. So today a Satoshi is worth about 1/5000th of a cent. So we're not talking big money here. When the routing's found and Then I hit confirm, payment goes to Stefan, which goes to Cass, which goes to John, John goes yeehaw, and then the confirmation comes back, I go, done, we're all happy. So let's just have a little look at before we look at a visual presentation of the Lightning Network today, just a little touch on Metcalfe's law. So one of the things that always confused me when I came along to Bitcoin meetups, and much more knowledgeable people talked about the network effect. Yeah, I've been in business for a while, I've got some social networks, I'm on LinkedIn, I know about networks, I know about the network effect. The more people you know, the more people who know people that you like to know, etc., etc. Same sort of idea with Metcalfe's law. So Metcalfe's law actually came about for telephone routing. So if John and I have a telephone each with a line between it, it's pretty useful just for John and that. If there's 5 people in the network, then it's a whole lot more useful because anyone can talk to anyone. Once I get to a dozen people in the network, so what Metcalfe was saying is the value of the network is equal to a constant, whatever that constant is, depending on the type of modelling you're doing, times the number of nodes in the network squared. So the value of this, if we assume C is 1, the value of this is 2, the value of this is 25, the value of that's 144. Now let's have a look at the Lightning Network. With the speed of 1,000 startled gazelles. So this is another Lightning Explorer. So the one we looked at first was 1ML. This is from Async. Async are the guys who make the Eclair wallet. So this is 4,000 nodes, roughly 40,000 channels. As I said, it does depend on which Explorer you're looking at. So these are the little dots, obviously the nodes, the connectors, obviously the channels. So I don't quite know why they don't put Australia in the middle, because we all know it's the most important place. And then we can click on Brisbane, God's own country, and scroll down, and there's my little node. So by clicking on my node, Wizard of Oz, we can see exactly whom I'm connected to all around the world. And then if we want the channel details, here's all the known channels. So my node's a pretty small node. It's a public node. It's a routing node. I'm not expecting to retire off the fees from my routing node. However, if we say, look at this guy, that's probably a different proposition. He's probably got a whole bunch there. So if we look at the top right-hand corner, he's got 1,214 channels open. That's a heck of a lot. So the combination of nodes and channels on the network means that there is no node that can't be reached in 6 hops or less. So the maximum number of hops from the most remote node with the least connections to another remote node with few connections is 6. And that underpins, that is partly driven by Metcalfe's law and the value that drives, but also that there are different types of nodes with different people committing different amounts of Bitcoin to fund their nodes, and therefore able to open much more larger channels and a higher quantity of channels. So at the moment, on the Lightning Network, each channel has a hard-coded limit of 0.16 BTC. At the time, that was about $500 US. So they implemented that, I think, late 2017, early 2018, and that was where Elizabeth Stark from Lightning Labs came out and said, yeah, look, it's all working, but if you're going to be using it, use it at your own peril, and then put in the hashtag reckless. And then, of course, people use that as a badge of pride. I'm being reckless. I'm using the Lightning Network, and then it's become more and more stable. So that point about the quantity of hops that you have to do to reach any point in the network is pretty important, because if you started to get up around 20 or 30 hops, then you're going to have more lagginess, payments are going to be slower, and potentially everyone's going to take a slice of the pie as it routes. So 6 is pretty good, and 6 is still the case, and is unlikely to change. If anything, it will go down, I suspect. There's some very interesting conversations starting to take place now about the mechanics and the financing of running channels and collecting fees. So I know that if I route a small payment to someone, that it is unlikely to collect any fees. So I can send a 1 sat payment for 0 fees. If I send a 2 million sat payment, that's definitely going to generate some fees, but usually not more than a handful of satoshis. Once we can start to put a lot more Bitcoin committed into the Lightning Network, which I suspect will partly be underpinned by version 18 of Bitcoin, where you can keep your Bitcoin on your ledger or on your Trezor in a hardware wallet, but available to the Bitcoin node that you run, that's when I think things will get capacity to explode.
Keys need to be live, so that may come eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so right now you can't do hardware wallet Lightning, not yet, but it is coming.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this was a payment. So this is a screenshot of the wallet of Satoshi. So this is probably one of the simplest Lightning wallets you can use. It's available on iOS. It's available on Android. It's custodial. So if you hate the idea of someone else having custody of your Bitcoin, then not the wallet for you. On the flip side, super easy to use, super accessible, and a great starting point. Am I comfortable keeping $100 in there? Yeah, no worries. Would I keep 10,000? Yeah, probably not. So this was actually in the same bar that John and I were having a drink in when we were up in Brisbane. So that's the routing. So it comes back and says routing with 1 Satoshi fee. Click OK, and that's the payment. That's it. That's done. So 2 parts. It goes off. It finds the routing and the fee for the routing. So at this point, it's found the routing. It's determined there's a 1 sat fee for a 338,000 sat payment, and it's asking me, am I okay with that? I've gone, yep, that's fine. And that's it. That's the recording of the whole thing. So the speed of the payment network is really quite impressive. Right, where do we get to? QR codes. So you can see the scan of the QR code. The new Bolt 11 standard is for QR codes, embeds both the Bitcoin address and a Lightning address into the same QR code. So if you're a merchant and you want to accept crypto payments or Bitcoin payments, then you can choose to have a Lightning node and or a Bitcoin node and generate a single invoice that'll go to either, depending on the person who's paying. So if I'm buying something that's $10, I want to be paying for that on Lightning. If I'm buying a new car and it's going to cost me more than $10, definitely, it'll cost me thousands or tens of thousands, then that'll be an on-chain transaction. So much simpler for merchants for that, for the Vault 11. I'm going to get that. Right, now comparative properties. So this was something put out by Nick Carter just on the weekend, and he looked at these main properties of Bitcoin. So it's a bearer asset. You can spend it, you control it. It's permissionless. I don't need to ask the bank whether I'm allowed to spend this. If I'm allowed to have access to it, it's permissionless. Scarcity. There's never going to be more than 21 million. It's effectively deflationary in nature. My favourite bit, it's programmable. The nerds love this bit. And it's verifiable. There's no question about whether I've got it or I don't have it. No question about whether the transaction was made or not made, and so on. So this layer above the box is the Bitcoin base layer. And you can see that with a couple of caveats, the Lightning layer replicates the base layer in almost all aspects. So the bearer asset nature, so I do need to have the Bitcoin node, the Lightning node needs to be online and available. Permissionless, yeah. If I'm not custodial, if I use an Eclair wallet, then yep, away I go. I don't need to ask permission. If I'm using my wallet of Satoshi, yeah, well, theoretically, practically, they could say, oh no, we're down for maintenance, or no, not at this time. Scarcity, no, Lightning is just Bitcoin. There's no more Lightning than there is Bitcoin. And programmability, that's a big win actually. Lightning is far more programmable and far more interesting than Bitcoin from a nerd perspective. From building business applications that can do real things, that's going to be super interesting, and we're already starting to see stuff come out. The first one of those was probably the Satoshi's Place, where you can paint a little picture. 1 pixel is 1 Satoshi. 1 Australian cent, 5,000 Satoshis. That'll get you 5,000 pixels. People have done all sorts of things on there. Verifiability, so strong, but again, it's a little bit more complex to look at all the channels and all the nodes on the Lightning network than it is to look at how much Bitcoin is, where it is. It's not all in one place like it is with the Bitcoin blockchain. Okay. I think that, I missed one example that I wanted to. Yes. I just wanted to give you a little demonstration of using the Lightning Network. So, Andreas Antonopoulos is, I'm sure most of you have heard of him, has done an incredible amount of education, and everything he's done is open source, and I think he's a good guy. And I've got this thing called a Tip and Me plugin, and so on my Twitter feed, I get this little lightning symbol that pops up. So instead of just saying, yeah, Andres, I like what you're doing, if I can get my mouse onto the right screen. I can actually paint. So we're going to do this live, which means the chance of failure is high, because that's Murphy's Law. Or I worked in Dublin for a few years, and They had a great saying there. Have you heard of O'Toole's law? Well, O'Toole held that Murphy was an optimist. So I'm going to use wallet of Satoshi here. So scan to pay. And let's send 10,000 Satoshis. Done. Oh, routing fees, 1 sat. Yeah, okay. And payment sent. That's it. Done.
Does the person on the other end have to have an Lightning wallet to receive it?
They need a Lightning node or a Lightning wallet, yes. And the Lightning node needs to be online.
For this specific application mode, you just need a tip and me account, and they have just a custodial wallet. So I think I've received some tips, but
Yeah, I think I might have even sent you a couple.
I'm killing. I'm like a zillion, and I think I've got like 13,000 sats or something. So yeah, just create a tip and me account with your Twitter account, and off you go. And you can withdraw your sats to your Lightning wallet address.
Think of it like they're effectively holding it for you.
And I think if you don't have a tip and me account, and I want to tip you, I think the app will notify you someone's trying to tip you. Click here to create an account.
Unfortunately, Craig Wright is no longer on Twitter, but if he was, we could have gone there and pressed the Lightning button. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have had a tip and me account. All right.
Tim, did you want to have a break and then we do the second half, or are you almost through the...
I'm just about done actually, John.
Okay.
That's Nick Carter's article for that. Where I took this from. So all of these things are hyperlinked in the presentation, so I'm very grateful for people who do great work and share it, so I think it's always important to call out the references. Okay, so that really wraps up that little segment on how Lightning works. Are there any other questions? I haven't gone into the contracts and the time lock contracts and all of that. That's kind of the next level down. We can do that another time. All right, we'll just wrap up quickly. So today, working fast, cheap, network growth is strong, adoption's accelerating. Feature delivery is really exciting. Just the amount of delivery of things, tools from people like Pierre Rochard and others. Decreasingly nerdy to set up is probably the most positive thing I can say. I've got a fairly deep technical background. I had to read a lot. I found the Casanode was super easy. I'm pretty sure if I gave the Casanode to my mum or my dad, who's in their 80s, they'd be okay with that. They might not know what to do with it after it got working, but it's a step in the right direction. Channel limit is still small, so we're still pretty much limited to the equivalent of $500 US. I would expect that channel limit size will expand as the maturity of the network stabilizes. So there are still some edge cases where it's possible to lose payments and channels. So one of the things about the game theory in Lightning is if I set up a channel pass and we both populate it with 1 million sats, and we're transacting quite happily backwards and forwards. And then at one point, Hass owes me 900,000 sats. And so he pays me the 900,000 sats. And then he goes, yeah, I'm going to try and get that back. So what he does is he recovers the channel state from just before he sent me the 900,000, so when he still had $1 million back in the day. And then he force closes the channel, and then the channel goes to execute the on-chain transaction, and it needs the other signature, which is from me. So I come along and I go, oh, the channel's been closed. Okay, well, yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, I've got 1.9 million in the sats in the channel. So here's the last channel state and my signature. And the sync looks at it and goes, whoa, wait a minute. This is a valid signature and a valid channel state that's later than the one he supplied. He's going in the system, you lose a lot. So if there is a nefarious player, then, and they try to game it, they lose their entire channel commitment. It all goes to the good actor. Now that sounds great in theory, except there are a couple of technical edge cases where Hass is running an earlier version of the Lightning node software. His hardware fails during a big thunder and lightning storm here in Sydney, and then when the power comes back on, he turns it back on, he powers it up, it starts up, it recovers, except that the channel state that he's recovering is the last one he saved, but the power outage happened exactly the same time as he sent the transaction to me. The transaction went through, the channel state wasn't backed up, so he restores the last channel state that he had, which is not the last one. So there are still edge cases where there is stuff to be fixed.
Tim, is this another potential criticism you could forestall and explain about how the claim has been made that if you don't have your phone on, you can't receive a payment, or you can't be sure that your transactions get through?
We'll cover that on the next slide.
Great, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure that was still in.
And manual channel creation is clunky. So it's possible. I've done it. I don't know as much as I'd like to know about Lightning. I wouldn't say it was easy. So things you can try. Mobile wallets of Satoshi. That's custodial. Definitely the easiest. Very, very simple, easy to use. You can top it up with payments from your bank account. You can prime it with Bitcoin. You can send Lightning to it. If you want to try that and you download it, I'll send you some sats this evening over a drink. Eclair is the one that I'm using at the moment. Blue Wallet is another. There are a whole bunch coming and others available. I found Eclair very easy to set up, and it has a lot of strength with it in terms of being a sovereign wallet. So you own the keys, you're not trusting anybody else. Full nodes. Casa and Nodal are boxes, so you can buy the box, you can plug it in, you've got a full operating node. That's great if you happen to be at home or wherever your box is. If you have an old notebook or a piece of hardware and you'd like to build and run the software stack yourself, Pierre Rochard has a great piece of software called a node launcher, which is pretty close to one-click build and deploy. The links to all of these things are at the tail end of these slides. What do? I run an Eclair wallet on my phone with a channel back to my Casa node. So my Casa node has a bit more Bitcoin in it, and a whole bunch more channels, as you saw. My Eclair wallet has not very much in it, and it has a single channel to my Casa node. So my Eclair wallet is pretty lonely. It only has one friend. My Casa node is a lot more friendly. It has a bunch of friends, and they talk to each other. So one of the questions I got in Brisbane, which is a fair ask, was does a node have to be on to get a payment? So if you think about the Bitcoin main chain, I can produce an address, I can send someone the address, I can send it over Telegram, and a year later they can make that payment and it'll end up in my wallet. With Lightning, the Lightning node has to be online to receive the payment. So how would that work if, the question I got was, if I wanted to pay you, Tim, I wanted to pay your salary over the Lightning network, seriously, how's that going to work? You're going to get your phone out and sync your Eclair node to make sure it's, and then tell payroll that, okay, you're good to send now? Clearly not going to work, no. So how would I do that in my setup? Well, my Casa node is on all the time. So I would actually be paid there. It's my bank. That's my bank. How much I then fund from my Casa node into my Eclair wallet, well, Eclair is my beer money, and my hamburger money, and my flowers for my wife money, because I forgot and I'm late and ... So that's how I personally do that at the moment. I think there are a few other combinations that increase security further. You can have a full build. You can use Node Launcher to build. You can use Blue Wallet. You can sync your Blue Wallet not to a custodial or to a Blue Wallet is a Blue Wallet. You can use a Lightning node on a full Bitcoin node that you control. That's a little bit further down the custodial and security route. I haven't gone that far yet. And for the amount of Bitcoin I have, probably not likely to. Okay.
Do all the transactions be recorded? Are they going to be recorded on the Bitcoin?
On the blockchain?
No.
No. And this is a really key difference. So there was a couple of key differences. One is that the transaction in the channel is only visible within the channel, and no one else outside the channel can see what goes on inside the channel. So if you and I have a channel, we have to do an on-chain transaction to open the channel, and then we can transact for a year, sending money backwards and forwards between us. At the end of the year, we go, oh, I'm moving to Argentina now, I need to close this channel because I'm not going to be in this business anymore. And you go, okay, that was good, we did some good business together, happy days. We close the channel, that's the second of the on-chain transactions that closes it out, and the net of the difference between, i.e. the amount that's in your wallet, the amount that's in mine, that gets settled on-chain. So if you're using the Bitcoin Block Explorer and you go and look at what happened, we set up a transaction, we closed it out, a year later, there was an effective transfer between the two wallets. That's the only visibility. The 140,000 transactions between our two organisations using that channel, no one's got any visibility to. So from a privacy perspective and an anonymity perspective, the use of Lightning is significantly superior. And then there are a number of other things on top of that. You can run your Lightning network node on the Tor network, which gives it a higher degree of anonymity protection. So that's the key. That's a major thing. The second major thing, which doesn't get talked very much about, which I think is actually more important than transaction speed, is the finality of the payment. So the payment you saw me make to Andreas, that's a settled payment. So a lot of the projects that are out in the crypto space, including, let's take Bitcoin. So if I send a small amount of money, if I send $10 worth to Hass now across the Bitcoin network, and I'm using my wallet on my phone and Hass is using his, then I can send the $10, scan Hass's QR code, and within a minute or so, he'll see that transaction. It won't be confirmed, it'll be zero conf, it'll be sitting in the memory pool, But for $10, he's probably pretty confident. He's happy to accept that it's a done deal. But it still requires it to be built into a block, committed onto the blockchain, and then confirmed with a number of blocks over the top before everyone's completely happy that it can never be backed out. With Lightning, when the transaction completes, it's settled. So that's a very big difference. So even with, say, the various cash networks, is they talk about faster transaction speed and higher transaction volume, but they're still talking zero confirmation transactions. So they're not settled. They're not a settled transaction until they're mined. Lightning uses a different approach. It still leverages off the security of the Bitcoin blockchain. It still runs on Bitcoin. You're still sending Bitcoin Satoshis. There's no more Satoshis on the Lightning network than there is in Bitcoin. Can never be. But it's the fact that the transactions are fast and cheap, and those transactions are settled. Does that make? Probably went a bit over on your answer. Yeah.
What about the physical security of those nodes you have, the custody?
Okay, so my custom node at home is sitting on my study desk. Yep. Its security as a whole, there's probably a whole bunch of people in this room who can give you a lot of different answers and ideas. Certainly I've learned more about IT security, operational security, since in the last 2 years of being in Bitcoin than I've learned about security in 35 preceding professional years. So the physical box, the physical box is actually a vulnerability point for the Casa node, because I haven't exported the private keys from the node. That's a good point. Pretty much everything else in the house could burn to the ground, and I'll be able to recover it all. So for those of you who are interested in that sort of stuff, and particularly if you're a bit older, like me, Pam Morgan has written a great book about cryptocurrency inheritance planning. What's that got to do with security? Yeah, well, at some point we're all going to die, and probably the people we love, we'd like to have the Bitcoin we've accumulated, and how keys get handled over, how they get recovered, wallets, ledgers, all those sorts of things. It's all part of security. So it's well worth a good think. Okay, I think. Yep, that's it. So, yeah, thanks for coming. Have a crack. If you don't have a Lightning wallet, download one, give it a try. Consider running a node. Tipping me is a bit of fun. If you're also on Twitter, have a play. I guess my last comment would be on Bitcoin. If you own one, run a node. That's it. If you own Bitcoin, if you're lucky enough to own one, run a Bitcoin node. All of the references are here for the various things. Some of you will have seen all these before, some maybe not, and hope that was useful and informative.
That was fantastic. Thanks very much, Tim. We're going to have this presentation put up online, if that's okay with Tim, so you can cover over anything else, click back it again, see anything you might have missed, and of course all of those references will be there as well. We'll take about a 10-minute break, and then we're going to have the next presentation. So yeah, get yourselves a drink or a meal or whatever, and then should be quite interesting. So a practical implementation of Lightning Network on an exchange, and with a live conversation with the actual devs from ZPay. So should be really interesting. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, good work. Good. I'm hard to try and pitch it at the right level.